I am here to answer the questions no one is asking. How many charm notches would each Silksong tool cost if its effects were translated directly into Hollow Knight? Some tools are going to have direct counterparts here from Hollow Knight, making it easy to compare the values and determine a notch cost. Others will just have to go on vibes, and a few might not even be rankable in the traditional sense as charms, but we'll get there. Starting with the blue and yellow tools in no particular order other than the order I felt like writing about them, we have the Druid's Eye and the Druid's Eyes. Druid's Eye is a tool in Silksong that generates a very small chunk of silk whenever you take damage. If you get the Moss Druid to upgrade it though, you'll generate 2 chunks of silk every time you take damage with the Druid's Eyes. Druid's Eyes rather unremarkable, but the upgraded Druid's Eyes nets you some pretty consistent silk regeneration that allows you to bind more frequently, which is great for staying alive in the long term. Druid's Eyes is comparable to Hollow Knight's Grub Song, which is only a 1-notch charm. Druid's Eyes is just missing any special synergies like Grub Song and Weaver Song combo from Hollow Knight, so it's technically still a weaker Grub Song as of now. If that's the case, I would place Druid's Eyes at Grub Song's 1-notch cost, and the base version is worse, so it might even be like a 0-notch cost here. The effect is so minuscule, like it's not even worth the same amount here, so I'm gonna put it in 0 notches for now. Next up, we have the compass. The compass is pretty straightforward. It's Silksong's version of the wayward compass, and it allows you to see your current position on the map. It also helps you remain oriented while you explore. This one is absolutely invaluable on a first playthrough or 2, maybe 3. Some people will probably never take it off, but ultimately, it's just a quality of life charm that doesn't do anything for combat or platforming, depending on who you ask. Wayward Compass is 1 charm notch, so I'm going to throw Silksong's compass in 1 charm notch. Next up, we have the pin badge. The pin badge is a blue tool that reduces the charge time of the needle strike by 50%. This is similar to Nailmaster's Glory and Hollow Knight, which reduces the charge times of nail arts from 1.35 seconds down to 0.75 seconds. Unlike in Hollow Knight, we have different crests to consider here. The pin badge would be more powerful on crests with strong needle strikes like Architect Crest as an example, and less valuable on needle strikes like the Reaper. That thing is sad. It's not good. What makes this decision easy though for where this one should go is Nailmaster's Glory sits at the super affordable 1 charm notch tier, given that pin badge has a similar effect and varying usefulness depending on your go-to crest. I think it's easy to say we should throw pin badge in the 1 charm notch tier. Next up, we've got Injector Band, which is a blue tool. It is Silksong's version of Quick Focus. This tool is super clutch, one of my favorites, especially on crests like the Witch for the quick explosive bursts of damage that also heal you, or on Shaman, which feels like it has a slightly longer bind than the other ones. Please fact check me on that, but it feels longer to me. Quick Focus clocks in at 3 charm notches and reduces the time it takes for the knight to heal by 33%. While this effect is great in Hollow Knight for getting an extra mask or 2 where you couldn't before, its effect is felt even more so in Silksong, where a single heal takes longer and heals more masks at a time. I've read reports that Injector Band speeds up the bind by 33%, which is the same exact effect percent as Quick Focus, just in a different environment. This value isn't on the wiki as of the time of writing, so if we do get updated information on Injector Band later, I'll be sure to leave a pinned comment about it. As a side note as well, I might be completely wrong here, but does the bind for Shaman Crest feel like it takes longer than the bind for other crests to anyone else? If that is the case, the 33% would be even more impactful on the Shaman than the other crests. Either way, this blue tool copy and pasted Quick Focus's homework, so we're gonna copy and paste Quick Focus's notch cost here. 3. Next up, we got another blue tool in Multi-Binder. Just like how Quick Focus and Deep Focus were complementary charms in Hollow Knight, Injector Band and Multi-Binder act as a similar pair here in Silksong. Both Quick Focus and Injector Band speed up healing, while Deep Focus and Multi-Binder both slow it down and allow more masks per heal. Deep Focus has a 4-notch cost and reduce your heal speed by 65%, which allowed for double masks healed from a single focus. Multi-Binder locks you into a double bind animation, which takes slightly longer than regular bind, but the numbers I've read are inconsistent on this as of the time of writing. One Redditor reported it takes 1.5 seconds to heal with Multi-Binder, whereas the Hollow Knight wiki reports that it takes the same amount of time for the base heal without the Multi-Binder slowdown. Regardless, it does make healing a bit more risky unless you offset its weakness with its quicker healing counterpart, and while I don't have the set numbers on the slowdown here confirmed, I think it's fair to place Multi-Binder at the same cost as Deep Focus and place it at 4 notches. Magnetite Brooch is a yellow tool. This is Silksong's answer to the Gathering Swarm charm. It's a 1-notch charm that collected Geo for you so that you could save time on taking a few steps to pick it up for yourself. This one draws in the rosaries to you, but unfortunately only rosaries and not shell shards. I will say it sucks that in Silksong currency disappears if it lands on spikes as well, and I almost wish that this charm negated that effect by pulling it in from the spikes in time. It's a shame, not a total deal breaker. This is still a convenient charm to have on. Sorry, tool to have on. This is one of those quality of life yellow tools, and just makes sense to leave it at 1 notch, similar to where Gathering Swarm was in Hollow Knight. Coffee, dudes. Next up, we have the Wispfire Lantern, which is a blue tool in Silksong. The Wispfire Lantern tool passively takes your silk and turns it into flaming enemy-seeking projectiles. This is extremely reminiscent of the soul-draining enemy-seeking babies of Hollow Knight's Glowing Womb. These both excel in melee-focused builds where you're not spending your silk or soul on spellcasting, as it allows the game to passively turn that meter into more DPS while you wail on things with your nail or needle. Glowing Womb babies deal 9 damage on impact, while the Lantern projectiles deal 10 damage on impact. I haven't compared enemy health pools to see if these numbers are different proportionally from each other, but the concept and numbers are similar enough that I think the cost should be the same. 2 notches. Magnetite dice are next. This is a yellow tool. I love this tool, and I know a lot of you watching at home love this tool based on some recent polls I posted on the channel. As a yellow tool, these are basically a free to slap on at all times. Their effect is like a diet version of Carefree Melody from Hollow Knight. Each time you're hit, the dice have an increased chance to activate and allow Hornet to not take damage for that instance. Upon successful activation, the odds reset to 0% and begin accumulating again for a maximum activation chance of 10.1%. This leaves the dice with an average activation chance of approximately 7.79%. In comparison, Carefree Melody increases and resets the same way at a much faster and more consistent rate. Carefree Melody increases by about 10% each hit and caps out at a 90% activation chance. This means on average, Carefree Melody is activating about 22% of the time you're hit, and 1 in 5 hits just don't affect you at all. With a third of the activation chance as Carefree Melody, I think it's fair to place Magnetite dice at 1/3 of the charm cost of Carefree Melody. Carefree Melody sits at 3 charm notches, therefore, mathematically speaking, I think Magnetite dice with a third of the effect should sit at 1 charm notch. You can see some argue for 2 notches here with how fun and cool the effect is, but mathematically speaking, let the numbers do the talking. 1 charm notch. Next up, we have Warding Bell. Warding Bell is a defensive blue tool. It generates a protective barrier around Hornet whenever she uses a bind. If Hornet were to take damage mid-bind with this tool equipped, the damage is negated, and a small explosion that deals 9 damage to nearby enemies goes off. Hollow Knight's equivalent to Warding Bell is Balder Shell, which is basically just a worse version of Warding Bell at this point. Balder Shell only gets to block 4 attacks with its effect before needing to be repaired at a bench, while Warding Bell has no such limit that I'm aware of. Balder Shell also does not have a retaliating explosion tacked on at the end. Comparing these two feels like comparing Longnail to Mark of Pride or comparing Soul Catcher to Soul Eater. Warding Bell is a straight up upgrade here, so I think we can base it off Balder Shell's 2-notch cost and go up 1 tier and make Warding Bell 3 notches. Next up, we have the Barbed Bracelet, which is a yellow tool that acts kind of like a double-edged sword. With this tool equipped, your needle strikes are buffed by 25%. The downside is you take double damage whenever this is equipped. You thought 2 mass per hit were bad? Wait till you see 4 mass per hit with this baby on. This charm is a worse version of Fragile or Unbreakable Strength from the original Hollow Knight. Strength boosted your nail damage by 50% with no extra damage taken in return. Clocking in at 3 charm notches, Strength can help us gauge where to place the Barbed Bracelet here a bit. With just the smaller multiplier and not considering the debuff, I think it would have been easy to place this one at 2 charm notches. However, that extra damage taken makes me think that maybe we should throw this one at 1 charm notch. It might be a bit scary though for those hitless speedrunner demons if they ever got their hands on this version though. So let's throw it in 2 charm notches for now. Let me know what you guys think in the comments though. Next up, we've got Scuttle Brace. This yellow tool is a fun one as it unlocks a new movement ability for Hornet, sort of, in that she can do like this backward scuttle move of varying usefulness, which I haven't found a use for it yet. And if I can find a clip of it, I saw someone say that you can scuttle up walls, so editing Haskell, throw that in here if that's true. This one reminds me of the 2 movement charms in Hollow Knight a bit. Dash Master, which lowers your base dash cooldown and also unlocks a new downward dash ability while it's equipped. Also Shape of Un, which shrinks the knight's hitbox in a similar way and also allows the knight to move while healing in this slug form. Truly unfortunate that Hornet can't bind while scuttling, but a man can dream, maybe in a future patch. Both Dash Master and Shape of Un are 2-notch charms, so given that Scuttle Brace is somewhat similar, I'd like to place this one at 2 charm notches. Next up, we have the Sawtooth Circlet, which is a blue tool in Silksong. The Sawtooth Circlet is a fun and unique tool that allows Hornet to do a burst of damage whenever she uses her Fade Down Cloak or Drifter's Cloak. That's your double jump or your float, in case you weren't aware. Interestingly, at the time of writing, the wiki has this noted as dealing 13 plus 1 damage rather than a flat 14 damage. As for why, I don't really know. But to compare, remember earlier we mentioned the Whizzfire Lantern projectile does 10 damage and Glowing Moon Babies deal 9. Obviously, you have to be a lot more up close and personal than those two projectile examples to deal damage, so it makes sense that the risk is rewarded with increased damage here. It's fun that it takes a movement ability and turns it into a supplemental damage source, and that reminds me a lot of the fan favorite charm Sharp Shadow, which clocks in at 2 charm notches. Although Sharp Shadow could never break the game like this tool can as far as I'm aware, editing Haskell, if you can find the clip of Sawtooth Circlet absolutely melting the final boss, throw that in here. For regular humans though, and not people that can do that lightning fast boss melt, I'm gonna match Sharp Shadow's cost here and throw Sawtooth Circlet in 2-notch cost. However, as of the time of writing, a patch dropped on October 13th of 2025 for Silksong, which said it buffed blue tools, quote, like Sawtooth Circlet, to better scale their damage with crafting kits. So maybe this could be a 3-notch cost if the damage is really even better now after the patch. Considering I had it at 2 before the buff, maybe it's a 3 now, I don't know. I'm gonna leave it here for now. Next up we have the Weighted Belt, which is a yellow tool that reduces the amount of horizontal recoil Hornet is pushed back when striking enemies with her needle, and it also lowers the amount of knockback she takes when taking a hit. This is Silksong's version of Steady Body, which completely negates the horizontal knockback of the knight's needle swings with no added side effect. While Weighted Belt only lowers horizontal knockback and doesn't completely negate it, it's hard to call it worse than Steady Body when it also has a supplemental effect that could help prevent you from taking additional environmental damage after getting hit. Steady Body weighs in at a whopping 1 charm notch, and that's exactly where I would place the Weighted Belt. We have the Claw Mirror and the upgraded version, the Claw Mirrors, next. These are blue tools. The Claw Mirror releases an explosion around Hornet after a successful bind. The explosion instantly deals 15 damage, followed by 2 ticks of 10 damage to enemies still within range for a grand total of 35 possible damage. When upgraded to Claw Mirrors, you got some serious numbers here. The initial damage is buffed to 30 instant damage, followed by 3 ticks of 12 damage for a grand potential total of 66 damage. Slap Claw Mirrors on the Witch Crest with Injector Band, and you've got a serious instant nuke on your hands. I would compare Claw Mirror and Claw Mirrors to Spore Shroom from Hollow Knight, which was a 1-notch charm that created an AoE spore cloud after a heal. This spore cloud did not have a big instant burst of damage like the mirrors do, and instead slowly chipped away for about 4 seconds for a maximum of about 26 damage. While enemies could just walk out of Spore Shroom's range no matter how you time it and make your damage minuscule, on Claw Mirrors, popping a heal at the right time means you're guaranteeing at least 30 damage from the start with the potential for more than double that. Given that the Spore Shroom is a 1-notch charm and that each of these mirrors feels like a direct upgrade from that, like a step up after each other, I'm placing the Claw Mirror at 2 notches and Claw Mirrors at 3 notches. Next up we have Long Claw, which is a blue tool in Silksong that boosts the range of Hornet's needle strikes. I couldn't find exact numbers on the wiki, but I heard that the range boost percentages varied based on what crest you were using, so I turned to Reddit. And Reddit's never wrong, so these numbers must be correct. I've got this linked in the description as well if you want to view the original post, but according to the post, which I will link in the description, the base horizontal swing on the ground gets boosted in range by Long Claw anywhere between 10 to 20%, with Witch getting the smallest boost and Beast getting the largest boost. What I found especially interesting here is, despite how stubby we all hear and feel the Wanderer crest is, Hunter is actually noted as having the smallest grounded horizontal swing according to the user. They did point out though that Hunter is better when it comes to upswings, air swings, and down strikes when compared to Wanderer, so that makes sense at least. If we take the average range boost provided by Long Claw across all crests, that comes out to about 15.57%. In comparison, Hollow Knight's Mark of Pride is 3 notches and boosts nail range by 25%. And Long Nail boosts nail range by 15% and only costs 2 notches. With basically the same average boost as Long Nail after rounding, Long Claw is definitely 2 notches. The Shard Pendant. This yellow tool boosts the amount of shell shards that are dropped by defeated enemies by 30%, rounded up to the nearest whole number. This is a pretty straightforward effect, and even with this on 24/7, I still found myself desperate for more shards whenever I got stuck on a boss after too many attempts. I really hope they upgrade this thing to like a 50% boost or something, because grinding for shards after too many boss losses is lame, Just made me learn to beat those bosses without tools. Maybe that's just a playstyle issue for me though. Maybe I should have explored more instead of slamming my head into a wall over and over. Tangent aside, Hollow Knight has a similar tool in Fragile or Unbreakable Greed, which I was surprised to find only boosts your geo gain by 20%, rounded up to the nearest whole number. It might be because Silksong's currency is split in two between rosaries and shell shards, while Hollow Knight only has geo. The 20% boost in Hollow Knight somehow feels significantly stronger than the 30% boost in Silksong. Regardless, you could argue 2 notches if you consider its percent boost is just straight up higher than Greed's, but you could also argue it's only worth half the notches due to the currency split and it's only boosting half your currency. I'm going to throw it in 1 for now. I can see the argument for 2. And speaking of currency splits, we have another yellow tool that boosts enemy currency output in the Thief's Mark. According to the wiki, this boosts enemy rosary output anywhere from 35 to 100%, depending on the enemy, which is a pretty sizable difference. It also has 2 hidden side effects. The first is when Hornet takes damage, she will lose 3.5% of her currently held rosaries, rounded up to the nearest number. Additionally, snitch flies will not attack Hornet while the Thief's Mark is equipped unless she attacks them first. Given what we already discussed regarding the shard pendant, I could see the argument between 1 or 2 charm notches here, but I'll place it in 1 notch for now, next to its cousin. The Fractured Mask, another incredibly popular blue tool in Silksong. The Fractured Mask acts as a safety net, granting you an extra free hit when one would have... What just happened? The Fractured Mask acts as a safety net, granting you an extra free hit when one would have otherwise meant your end. This can absorb both single mask hits as well as double mask hits. This grants you up to 2 free masks when activated depending on what you're hit by, as it just negates the entire damage instance. The only drawback is, once it activates, it breaks and needs to be refreshed at a nearby bench. 1 or 2 free masks is a pretty big deal, especially in Silksong where you're super frail in the early game. I would argue though that it's not as impactful as the 2 free masks that the knight can get from Fragile and Unbreakable Heart in the first game, as the knight can heal those 2 extra masks over and over to take a bunch of extra hits, whereas the Fractured Mask just gives you the 1 before needing a bench refresh. In the context of Silksong, this is an incredibly powerful tool that should be worth maybe 3 or 4 notches, as there isn't another early game tool that can compare to its ability to increase your survivability. In the context of Hollow Knight though, Fractured Mask is essentially a slightly worse version of Unbreakable and Fragile Heart charms, which cost 2 charm notches. Lifeblood Heart from Hollow Knight sits at a similar boat as a slightly worse version of Unbreakable and Fractured Heart, in that you get 2 free hits, but those Lifeblood hits need to be refreshed at a bench after each use. Lifeblood Heart also costs 2 notches, so given the similarities between Lifeblood Heart and the Fractured Mask here, I think Fractured Mask would cost 2 charm notches. Next up, we have the Egg of Flelia. This blue tool reduces the cost of your silk skills from 4 strands down to 3 strands, but only while Hornet is at full health. This means that with max silk hearts, Hornet can cast silk skills without even hitting enemies. With the maximum silk capacity, not counting spool extender, you've got 6 spell casts on your hand rather than the 4.5 you would get without the egg equipped. This one is like Spell Twister from Hollow Knight, which also makes spells cheaper, but with the added downside that I don't understand the reasoning behind. Maybe they thought Shaman Crest would be too strong if it had unmitigated Spell Twister or something, who knows. They're probably right too. Have you seen those Volt Filament builds? Spell Twister clocks in at 2 charm notches, so you could argue the Egg of Flelia is 1 or 2 charm notches depending on how heavy you weigh the downside of deactivating when not at full health. I'll probably never use this one much since I'm almost never at full health in Silksong. This game is hard. I'd personally rank it at 1 notch, but I know that for others it should still be a 2 notch cost. I'm gonna throw it in 2 for now. Let me know what you guys think. Next up on our list, we have the Polyp Pouch, and this is the Boss Melter. This blue tool applies poison to every single one of your red tools, which is a damage over time effect that increases in power depending on how many crafting kit items Hornet has acquired. At 3 or more kits, the venom will deal 2 ticks of 3 damage. These ticks are unaffected by enemy damage modifiers, a common hidden value enemies and bosses have to limit the potential amount of damage they can take from incoming damage sources. This makes poison from the Polyp Pouch incredibly versatile, especially since it applies on any and all red tools to suit your current needs. This is especially useful on red tools that hit multiple times, like the Cogfly or the Curve Sickle, since the poison effect starts anew each time the tool inflicts damage. Polyp Pouch feels like what Hollow Knight's Defender's Crest wishes it could be. Defender's Crest was 1 charm notch and had a handful of synergies that in most cases actually just nerfed your net DPS. Polyp Pouch in comparison has every possible synergy it can and turns your red tools into DPS machines. At the point that this tool almost feels like the Shaman Stone of this game. We do have another contender for the Shaman Stone of Silksong in our next blue tool, but unlike that one, Polyp Pouch can be found incredibly early in Silksong, similar to how you could buy Shaman Stone in Forgotten Crossroads, and have it carry you through the entire game. Shaman Stone should be 4 notches if we're being for real, but Team Cherry made it only 3 notches for some reason, so I'm throwing Polyp Pouch in the same tier, 3 notch cost. Our other blue contender for Silksong's Shaman Stone, we have the Volt Filament. Volt Filament boosts the power of your Silk skills by 25%, and also adds on 1 to 2 ticks of 5 damage depending on the skill. This 25% is fine and very nice, but you'll really feel it when you equip this onto the Shaman Crest, which boosts your Silk skills by another 50%, and also allows you to equip 3 Silk skills at once. So with Volt Filament and Shaman Crest, your Silk skills are 75% stronger, and will also have a couple extra ticks of chip damage tacked on top of that. It also has a hidden effect that can make it electrocute water, which is pretty fun for frying enemies with. This base 25% damage on its own certainly isn't as impressive as Shaman Stone's 33 to 51% spell damage boost, but the damage ticks at the end make up for this a little bit, kind of. I don't think the smaller multiplier is enough to drop it an entire notch cost down to 2 notches, especially since its effect can stack with Shaman Crest additively. This tool does become available much later into the game before you can use it, similar to the Polyp Pouch. It's also less versatile in the builds that it works in when compared to the Polyp Pouch, in my opinion. Realistically, you could throw the pouch on any crest with a red and blue tool, but I find it hard to justify using the Volt Filament outside of the Shaman Crest. Regardless, the Volt Filament truly excels at the one thing that it does, and it does it very well, and I think it would be a similar cost to the Shaman Stone's 3 notches. The Weave Light, this blue tool enhances the speed at which your silk hearts regenerate free silk strands and also acts as an extra silk heart. To be more specific, the first strand's regeneration goes down from 1.5 seconds to regenerate in 1 second. The subsequent strands then reduce drastically from 4.25 seconds without Weave Light to only 2.5 seconds each with Weave Light. This means at 3 silk hearts, Hornet can regenerate 4 strands of silk for free over the course of 9 seconds without even hitting an enemy. This one's a bit tricky to place for me. It doesn't have an easily comparable Hollow Knight charm to use as a point of reference in my opinion. The silk regeneration isn't coming from the Weave Light itself, it's just something that Hornet can do on her own, and the Weave Light is enhancing how she does it. The Knight cannot generate soul on its own without smacking enemies, but I think if we just pretend the Weave Light is slowly generating silk on top of what Hornet generates, that might help us place this one a bit. If that's the case and the Weave Light is slowly building meter up, but to a certain point, then it might be considered somewhat similar to King Soul if King Soul had a limit on the amount of soul it could produce. King Soul is a whopping 5 charm notches generated slowly but infinitely. Weave Light acts somewhat similarly, but caps out how much silk it can help you produce passively. I think Team Cherry would place Weave Light somewhere around 3 or 4 notches, and I'm leaning 4 for now. The Spool Extender, this blue tool increases Hornet's maximum silk carrying capacity by 3 strands. Some notable uses for this is allowing Hornet to have enough silk to have 2 binds stocked up at once, as well as just spamming a bunch of silk skills at the start of a fight. We don't have a Hollow Knight charm that increases the Knight's maximum soul capacity, so we won't have an obvious charm notch comparison again here. Personally, I think having an increased maximum amount of silk is not as good as just having an increased silk regeneration rate. Sure, an increased maximum lets you fire off a bunch of silk skills at the beginning, but after that, then what? I think an effect like rapidly regenerating silk is more important, so you more regularly have it for both silk skills and for binds. This effect is somewhat useful, overall not too powerful. Going off vibes, I think this one would be a 2-notch cost. Reserve Bind, this blue tool allows Hornet to continue to use bind when she does not have enough silk to do so. Using bind this way can only be done once before needing to be refreshed at a bench, and it also makes the bind animation slightly slower. There isn't a Hollow Knight equivalent to this tool that lets you heal without spending soul. I'm seeing a trend here. I don't know why I grouped these 3 together. I guess it makes sense. They're all silk related in some way. We'll have to go on vibes again for this one. Reserve Bind is an emergency 3 masks healed once per bench rest, and it can be super clutch in certain situations. If Hornet's Bind worked like the Knight's Heal and only granted 1 mask, I could see this being a 1 or 2 notch charm for sure, just for a buffer of safety in tight situations. However, as the Reserve Bind is now, it has the potential to heal you up 3 masks. I personally think Team Cherry would place that somewhere around 2 or 3 notches in cost. The heal slowdown certainly holds it back slightly, but Deep Focus has a heal slowdown, and Team Cherry made that thing cost 4 notches. I'm leaning 3 notches here, but let me know what you guys think about this one. Memory Crystal. This blue tool causes Hornet to, after a small delay, spawn in icy statues of herself whenever she takes damage. These will explode when touched by enemies or hit by Hornet and deal a base of about 20 damage, give or take, depending on the enemy's hidden damage multiplier. This is somewhat reminiscent of Hollow Knight's Thorns of Agony, which lashes out with thorny vines that dealt 1x nail damage whenever the knight took damage. These vines would momentarily lock the knight in place as they lashed out and remove some valuable invincibility frames for repositioning into safety. From what I can tell, and someone please fact check me on this, it appears that Hornet is not losing any iframes whenever she's hit with Memory Crystal equipped, as the statue slowly spawns in after being hit instead of being instantly created. Memory Crystal and Thorns of Agony each have their pros and cons, to the point that I would consider these different versions of each other rather than one being an upgraded form of the other. You could argue that Thorns of Agony helps prevent you from getting swarmed or overwhelmed by multiple smaller enemies, while Memory Crystal has the benefit of not eating into your iframes. Thorns of Agony is one notch, so I think Memory Crystal would also be one notch. Magma Bell and Wreath of Purity, I'm going to do these together. We might as well cover both at the same time. They're both blue tools. They have similar effects in concept and execution. Magma Bell reduces the damage from fire and magma based attacks, as well as damage from the environment like lava pools and stuff. This helps a ton since those usually hit for 2 mass apiece, but only hit for 1 with Magma Bell equipped. Wreath of Purity prevents your silk from being instantly infested with maggots whenever even your pinky toe touches that disgusting maggot water. Each of these both has its limitations somewhat. Like Magma Bell has a cooldown where it needs to refresh itself for a few seconds after absorbing a hit, or Wreath of Purity breaking and needing repair at a bench after resisting the maggots too long. What these two tools share is that they both are insanely valuable, but only in very specific environments. In Biowater or Putrefied Ducks, Wreath of Purity is a godsend. In anywhere else in the game, Wreath of Purity is a waste of a blue slot. We don't have any charms in Hollow Knight that fill a similar niche of only being useful in certain biomes, which makes these too hard to settle a notch cost for. Unless maybe you count Void Heart, which makes the shades in the abyss not attack you, but Void Heart is a 0 notch anomaly for story reasons, so I wouldn't use that as a point of reference here. Just going off of vibes alone, I would throw these in 2 notches, but let me know what you guys think. Ascendance Grip, another quality of life yellow tool. I'm sure you can guess where this one's heading. Ascendance Grip allows Hornet to remain stationary when clinging to walls, a helpful convenience for some platforming segments or even stalling out some attacks in certain boss arenas. We don't have a Hollow Knight equivalent here, but we could make comparisons to other convenience charms like Sprint Master or Dash Master. I think Dash Master is 2, so I don't know why I said that. Anyways, I'm throwing it in 1 notch. The Snitch Pick. This blue tool has 2 effects. The first effect is that it allows your claw line or harpoon ability to hit twice for increased damage. I didn't know that before doing this video. Additionally, the extra hit forces the enemy to drop some rosaries and shell shards. The dropped rosaries are subtracted from what the enemy drops when they're defeated, so it's not really extra rosaries, but the shell shards are extra. This makes it pretty effective at both passively farming resources by harpooning an enemy as you pass by, as well as just increasing the amount of shell shards you receive overall. If Unbreakable Greed is 2 notches in Hollow Knight for just increasing the currency you get, then Snitch Pick might be a step above Greed by also increasing your potential DPS since it allows one of your abilities to hit twice. I really wish I knew more about this tool during my first playthrough, as I would have played around with it quite a bit, but either way, I think this one is 2 or 3 notches and I'm throwing it in 3. Also, I mentioned this during the Sawtooth Circlet segment, but a patch dropped while I was writing this October 13th, 2025, which buffed blue tools, quote, like Sawtooth Circlet, to scale their damage with crafting kits. I'm curious if Snitch Pick is like Sawtooth Circlet, as I would consider it to be. They're both blue tools that deal damage, so it's definitely worth the 3 notch cost now if this was buffed and gets increased damage depending on your crafting kits. Please correct me in the comments though if I'm wrong. Silk Speed Anklets. The Silk Speed Anklets slowly drain Hornet's silk meter in exchange for boosting her sprint speed by 30%. This effect only works while on the ground, only while sprinting, and only while Hornet still has silk that can be consumed. We could compare this to Hollow Knight's Sprint Master charm, which increases the knight's walking speed on the ground by 20%. While Silk Speed Anklet's movement speed is 10% better than Sprint Master's, it also has a built-in downside that makes me wary of increasing its notch cost more than its 1 notch Hollow Knight counterpart. 1 notch for the anklets. Spider Strings. One of the more interesting yellow tools. The wiki just says its usefulness is missing information as of the time of writing. It evidently increases the range of effectiveness of your Needle-In and also allows it to stun enemies in some cases. This is not incredibly useful, and the only use case I've seen someone come up for it so far is pairing it with the Lifeblood Overdose effect to stall for a free heal. The closest comparison I can make with this tool is maybe Hollow Knight's Dream Wielder, which greatly enhances the speed and soul gain of the Dream Nail. I think that Dream Nail has a better effect, but we've got another 1 notch yellow tool in our hands here. There isn't much going for this one. Dead Bug's Purse, another yellow tool with a mediocre effect. Can you guess where I'm putting this one? This yellow tool allows Hornet to retain half of her current rosaries upon death, with the other half remaining in her cocoon. Can't think of a Hollow Knight equivalent for this other than maybe paying GG to recall your shade, but that's certainly a bit of a stretch, and it's not even charm related. Minor quality, life change at best. 1 notch. Quick Sling. This is a blue tool. Now this is an interesting one. Quick Sling allows Hornet to throw 2 red tools at a time instead of just 1. The extra red tool is not free and still eats at your resources. Quick Sling just allows you to deploy them more rapidly. We'll be touching on shortly how red tools work in Silksong, and the closest comparison I could make to Quick Sling is if Hollow Knight had a tool that allowed you to cast 2 of the same spell at once, while still spending the soul for each spell. This doesn't currently exist in Hollow Knight, but if it did, it would be a beast next to Spell Twister and Shaman Stone. If you've got the Shell Shards to spend, this is just a net DPS boost, especially on the Architect crest. I definitely think something like Quick Sling would be worth 3 notches if translated into Hollow Knight for 2 spells at once. Okay, now the red tools. As hinted at throughout this video, red tools function differently from blue and yellow tools. Blue and yellow tools are passive effects that change how you play the game and are most similar to Hollow Knight's charms in their effects. Most red tools, on the other hand, are not like charms at all. There are a few exceptions, but about 85% of the red charms actually function more like Hollow Knight's spells than like charms. If you think about it, you're spending some sort of resource meter, and some kind of projectile comes out and deals damage. This sounds a lot like casting a spell by spending soul in Hollow Knight. It's unfortunate, but I think that any tool that is something Hornet throws or deploys is simply unrankable as a charm, since they're effectively spells with the Hornet themed flair. Okay, I've gone ahead and placed all the throwables or deployables in an unrankable tier, but that leaves us with 3 unique red tools that still have effects somewhat reminiscent of Hollow Knight's charms. While these red tools do still need to be activated in order to gain their effects, I think we can use a little imagination for the sake of fun to try and imagine how these would work in Hollow Knight. So maybe you can picture the effect has some kind of cooldown, or it activates whenever you heal, or something more creative that someone in the comments can come up with. The Flint Slate. When activated, Flint Slate enhances Hornet's needle damage by 50% for an 8-second duration. Additionally, landing 3 hits in a row with Flint Slate active causes the enemy to take 3 ticks of fire damage. Hollow Knight has a 50% melee damage boost in Fragile and Unbreakable Strength, and it's a top 3 charm in the game. Adding a fire damage over time effect on top of that is absolutely insane. Even if we have to give Flint Slate some kind of cooldown to make it work in Hollow Knight, I still think it would match the Fragile and Unbreakable Strength cost due to its damage over time effect at 3 notches. Flea Brew. When activated, Flea Brew grants Hornet a 40% boost to her walking and sprint speed, but additionally, her needle attack swings are sped up by 50%, and the cooldown time between her needle attacks are reduced by 50%. This all lasts for 10 seconds total. Starting with the speed boost effect, that is double the 20% speed boost that the 1-notch Sprint Master Charm grants. Moving on to the weapon swing buffs though, is where it gets crazy. Let's compare the percent boost to the almighty Quick Slash. For 3 charm notches, Quick Slash speeds up the attack duration by 20% and also reduces the downtime between attacks by 32%. It's astonishing to me that arguably the best charm in Hollow Knight, Quick Slash, is in Silksong, but with even higher percent boosts. We do have to factor in some kind of activation method to make it work though. If we didn't have to, I think Flea Brew would be like a 5-notch cost, but with an activation method needed, I think Flea Brew would be somewhere around 4 notches. Last up, we have the Plasmium File, one of the best survivability tools in Silksong. When activated, Hornet injects herself with this thing and gains a lifeblood mask. The maximum capacity here is 6 masks, which is a lot of free hits between benches. It's also got that added overdose effect if you've got the Architect crest equipped, but that's not very easy to translate for our ranking here today. If we compare lifeblood charms, the most notch efficient of them is Lifeblood Core, which grants 4 lifeblood masks for 3 notches. Going off the same ratio of masks granted versus notches spent, math tells us that the Plasmium File should cost 4.5 charm notches. Since we don't have the liberty of half notches to work with here, I think I'll go ahead and round this up to be our only 5-notch cost across the board. Even if this has some kind of made-up activation method to deal with, other Lifeblood charms have worse notch cost ratios than the one we used as a point of reference, so I think it's only fair, 5 notches. And that's it. That's every Silksong tool's estimated notch cost based on numbers and vibes, except for the reds that actually act more like spells. Let me know if you guys disagree with any of my placements here. I'm always open to discussion. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the road ahead.